Okay, let's dive into the sources you sent our way. Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is to cut through all the noise and really pull out the key insights from the material you share. Today, we're digging into some, well, pretty significant stuff happening around Bitcoin lately. So let's start with the market picture from the source material. Bitcoin sitting around $106,290. That's down a bit today, maybe 0.9%. It pulled back from recent highs, looked like near $112,000. And the material suggests a couple of reasons, right? Fed signals being kind of hawkish, and also some big players taking profits.
Yeah, and what's really interesting there is the kind of tension it shows. You've got those macro factors, like you said, the Fed may be hinting at rate changes, but the sources also really zero in on an internal thing, how different Bitcoin holders are behaving.
Right, right. That's where it gets fascinating. The material seems to show a split. Some of those whales, the big early holders, they seem to be selling off some coins, maybe locking in gains.
Exactly, distributing, as the sources put it. But then you've got the long-term holders, and the sources really emphasize these guys are showing, well, incredible conviction. They seem, pretty unwilling to sell, which of course tightens the supply available for anyone new coming in.
Creates a real push-pull dynamic, doesn't it? Some selling, others holding tight.
Totally. Distribution from some, but real holding from that core group.
Yeah. And it's not just individuals anymore, is it? The sources detail this pretty significant trend of corporations getting involved. GameStop, for instance, they announced, what was it, a $500 million purchase?
That's the number, yeah, $500 million. Though it's worth noting, the sources point out the traditional market wasn't exactly thrilled. GameStop's stock actually fell quite sharply after that news broke.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it suggests that even with corporate adoption happening, traditional investors are still figuring out how to react. Still a bit uncertain.
That friction, that gap between crypto and traditional finance, that definitely seems like a key theme. But then there's another layer, even bigger than corporate moves, that the sources highlight: governments. The U.S. government, according to the material, has actually formalized something called a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
A strategic reserve, yes, that's the term used. The source describes it as being built up from seized crypto assets. The idea presented is, well, to treat Bitcoin as a national reserve asset, essentially, and funded this way, through forfeited crypto, it apparently makes the U.S. the biggest known state holder. We're talking around 200,000 BTC, based on the estimates provided.
Wow, 200,000 Bitcoin held by the U.S. government. That's something. And this seems to be happening alongside more political engagement too, right?
Yeah.
The material mentions figures like Vice President J.D. Vance really championing crypto, called President Trump a champion of crypto recently.
Yeah, the sources report on that specific event and that, quote, citing strong administration support for the crypto sector. And just relaying what's in the material here, they also mentioned discussions came up about potential overlaps with the president's own investments. It just highlights how complex things get when politics and this new asset class intersect, as presented in the sources. We're just reporting what they included.
Understood. Okay, so let's try and tie these threads together for you, the listener.
Yeah.
We've seen a market snapshot with these interesting older dynamics versus macro stuff. We've seen corporations jumping in, but maybe facing some pushback from traditional markets. And now governments building actual strategic reserves and politicians actively, endorsing the asset.
Yeah, if you step back and look at the bigger picture, all these different things, the market movements, the corporate plays, state actions, political nods, they're all fundamentally changing Bitcoin's role. It really shows it moving beyond just being like a tech curiosity for speculators. Now it's something governments are thinking about strategically, politicians are talking about openly. It points to it becoming more embedded in the global economy and policy discussions.
Absolutely. It feels like a real shift. So if you think about all this information from the sources, here's maybe a final thought to chew on. You've got Bitcoin dealing with market swings driven by different holder groups. You've got companies adopting it but facing friction, and governments and politicians getting seriously involved. What single factor do you think will ultimately be the most decisive in shaping its long-term place? Will it be the tech itself, the institutional buy-in, or its growing political status? Something to consider. And that wraps up our deep dive for today.